Scotty B here for the camping show. This is a 4-person tent setup. I'm using a Mech Wanderer 4, that's my own personal tent. And it was said to me that I should always find highest ground in a campsite area. The lowest area, yeah, if it rains heavy, you're going to be floating in your tent. And somebody suggested that I physically lay down where I want to set up my tent and just see if that's an actual comfortable spot for me. I'm using a footprint here. I find the footprint is just way more versatile to help with the actual setup. I can set up the poles onto the footprint and I could move that around without pegging it down. I can set the fly on top of the tent poles if it's raining, and then I can set up my tent inside the fly and stay as dry as possible. The footprint also will keep the moisture from rising up into your tent. Getting wet and being cold is never a pleasant thing. The footprint will also keep sharp sticks, rocks from puncturing the bottom of your tent, whether that's a bathtub style or not. This is a 6-pole hub system, and I find it incredibly easy to use and set up. There's 4 orange poles that are fairly long, and as you can see, you can just lay them out in the general direction, and they will almost automatically snap together. There's a little bit of shaking, but they go together quite well. I overlap my poles on top of my footprint, and I run out the pole just past the footprint strap. So that way when I put the strap on, I have to pull it and there's tension on that, because otherwise they tend to fall off if there's no tension on it. I go diagonal. I find the diagonal works best for me, and I use what I call the foot stomp on the strap method, and that just holds it down so I can use 2 hands putting that pole in. The third one here I'll insert, and what I try and do is keep the poles upright, because if I let them fall, 9 times out of 10 that third strap falls off. I pull on the 4th corner diagonal, use that foot stomp method of holding it down, and I can use 2 hands to put that in. Now, as you can see, it's incredibly versatile to be able to move that footprint wherever I need to. It just gives you far more options where you want to place the tent in its final position. The bag is waterproof, works really well, holds the tent, the fly, the footprint, and I even put pegs when I'm careful so they don't poke anything out. And the tent, the best way to do the tent, again, I do the diagonal, but the doors go where the blue poles are, and then the blue poles are parallel to the seam on the footprint. I use the outside part of the straps. For me, this carries the rain on the fly as far away from my tent as possible. If I were camping springtime or late fall and snow was expected, I would go closest to the inside of the tent on the fly strap grommets. I want to try and get the snow off of the dome of the tent as readily as possible. The tent is held up, each corner is held up by 3 snap-on clips. I find them incredibly easy to do. They're a lot easier than threading poles through a tent tunnel, a fabric tunnel. But there's also higher points of stress on those 3 points and on the tent material. Though as long as you've got lots of pegging and lines keeping your tent held down, I don't see it as being a detrimental thing. For setting up, I don't worry about the diagonal on this part right now. I just do 1 through 2, 3, 4. What I do is I go back to the first peg that I put in, and then I pull that diagonal at the end. On the door sides, I find from door to door, you want to have that as tight as possible, whereas on just a wall side, it's not as important to have the wall sides pulled tight. But this peg here, and then I go back to number 1, I'm pulling that out and I'm pulling the tent diagonal and making sure I've got lots of tension on the door side of the tent. Some people have concerns that if there's not enough tension on the front doors that they can't open the tent door one-handed, which would be a disadvantage at night when typically, you're holding something and don't have a spare hand. You can see some of the tension points there between the 3 strap sides. And I do the blue pole strap, as they're color coded as well, and I do that I do the blue pole strap first, and then I do the little rubbery plastic nub last. So strap first and then the nub last. Now again, if it were raining, I would have the option to do the fly before the tent, and then I could set up my tent inside that fly and be as dry as possible. The fly I find is the most challenging part of setting up the tent when I'm alone, just simply because it's such a large piece of material and the wind will often carry it. So I encourage you to work with the wind. It's really counterproductive trying to go against the wind, and it just doesn't help, and it leads to more frustration than necessary. I go with, on the blue poles, on the inside of the flies, there's pockets on each side above the vents on either side of the doors. And I found it beneficial to do these pockets first. It just, again, keeps the tent fly from falling off the poles and having to struggle with fighting against the material. So you can see the pocket there, goes on nice and snug. Hold over the material and do the first corner on your fly there. At each corner, midway up, there's a Velcro loop, and then there's a corresponding white strap on the outside. So if you can find that white strap on the outside, you can find that Velcro loop. And for the fly, I found it doesn't matter about diagonal at all. Just doesn't matter. So the economy of motion, set up the corners 1, 2, 3, 4, and I go with the outside strap on the fly for that. It isn't too bad on the first 2 corners, but the tension on the 3rd and 4th corners increases. And as well, just make sure you use all the pegs and the tie downs that you need to. Nice side angle looking at the Velcro loop. And 4th corner. So this is the most challenging corner. It takes a couple of tries to get that grommet into the bottom of the tent pole. And tent pegs here. Each of the vestibules can be held down by 3 tent pegs. Now, I personally only use 2 tent pegs because I find the 2 tent pegs are side by side and just a little bit redundant. Now, in high winds, you may choose to go that way just to keep your door from flapping around when you're exiting the tent. So there's the second loop, and I choose not to use it. And because the ground is soft, I'm using my foot to push down on my peg. Be really careful on that angle. I've bent a number of pegs trying to go into harder ground. Some of the car camping sites I've been to, they use crusher dust or gravel. And some of that is as hard as cement. So you might want to use a rock or a larger log from the wood pile. And just snug those straps down on the vestibules, and you can see already that the tent fly is really looking nice and smooth. It's a very aerodynamic tent and fly. And just making sure all those straps are pulled down nice and tight, just to keep those corners. You don't want them blowing in the wind. You don't want to have to get out of your sleeping bag when you've been in it and it's nice and warm at night and have to tie down your tent. And the side elastics on the fly, I found after a year and a half they lost most of their elasticity, but your mileage will vary. I've had my tent out in the sun, and the UV really affects it quite a bit, so I pull mine fairly tight. But they will keep that. You can see the rain will fall quite a ways away from your tent. Good luck with your tent setup. I'm Scotty B for the Camping Show. You take care.